I'll hand over to Becca. So you need to keep the cursor on that bit.
Thank you. That's good. Thank you very much. Lovely to meet you all. I'm Rebecca Savage. So I'm one of the trainee consultant practitioners in midwifery. Hopefully Tony's told me how to use the cursor now, so we'll be okay. So it's lovely to meet you all, both everyone who's online and in person here today. I'm just going to quickly take you through what it's been like, I suppose, to learn the QI myself and then to start moving towards supporting others in their own QI journeys. Give a bit of an example of that with QI coaching within the trust that I most recently worked in, and tell you a couple of other projects I've been involved in supporting, and then moving on to the importance of creating a learning culture across systems. So I'll do this briefly because I know Tony's just spoken about the journey as a whole. But I think really ultimately it's really important for me to acknowledge as well that I was a complete novice when I came to this programme 3 years ago in terms of QI. I'd come from a very clinical background, and although service improvement was within my awareness and maybe kind of wanting to make changes and seeing where there are opportunities to make changes, not really knowing how I could do that in an easy and put together format that I think really QI really does embody. So my first year I think was quite quick. If I was going to just sum it up, it was like a quick learning process, focusing on the small things, you know, picking the one small thing that you can have impact on, as Tony was saying there in some of our earlier attempts, and really importantly, failing fast and learning faster, I think was one of my key messages that I certainly took home from that. I think failure is one of those things that we struggle with within the NHS and as care providers, because ultimately to us failure means possibly harm. But you know, within a context of learning and shaping and safety, actually we need to be able to do that in a safe way and in an environment that helps us to learn and put things right quickly. So I would say I was probably a little over ambitious initially and went a bit big on some of my QI projects, but I soon learned that you had to really scale it back and pick something that you could impact. So some of the projects that I've been involved in supporting others, so moving really through onto my third year now. The main one has been supporting the professional midwifery advocate within our trust to develop a learning process really for a midwife to take on a project of her own. I introduced QI and to the community midwifery teams within the COVID period, where obviously we've all experienced a great number of changes that had to happen quite fast. So it was introducing those tools that I could to support the community teams to make some changes that needed to occur. And then more recently, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, is working within the Academic Health Science Network and the Patient Safety Collaborative, which is what I now do. So now this hasn't come up, which is maybe I have to press something else. Hang on, because there's half of it there. There we go. I'm just going to click all these through. So the supporting learning with the PMA project, this is something that our PMA, which is a professional midwifery advocate, identified from her own practice with the birth afterthought. So this is not COVID related specifically, but something that happened within this last year. And I think is important to highlight from a service user perspective, has most definitely, COVID has most definitely impacted. We are seeing a lot more women, I imagine now, coming through birth afterthoughts, especially from COVID, with a degree of trauma that's going to be different from what they had before. So we were very keen to identify how maybe we could help improve the listening, specifically on the labour ward. And so a labour ward midwife came in to work with us. And to develop, really, the idea was to develop her own QI knowledge and experience. It could have been any project ultimately, but it was really lovely that it fitted with what she was doing. And she really took a lot away from that professionally as well. So I think we very quickly realised again that the project itself was really, really wide and very varied, and we could have gone down a number of different avenues, but it was really important to acknowledge where we could have impact and then to demonstrate the changes that we were making. it also became quite apparent, I think, in trying to support somebody else to learn something completely new, that although there was dedicated time there to do that learning, it was also difficult, I suppose, to do that without a framework. And so I very quickly pulled out all of my old QI things so that I could show and demonstrate how I had learned the process itself, and also how much I didn't understand when I first started, because it's not something I think that quickly goes into your brain. You have to keep practicing these QI tools and all the different parts of the methodology ultimately. And it certainly helped that we also got her a bit of access to our QIC Learn here with Nikki, which was fabulous because that consolidated everything that I had been trying to teach her on a one-on-one basis, and she got to kind of work through that in her own time. So that project didn't ever come to a conclusion within the time frame that she had to do that, within the days that she was given. But you'll see from the feedback here, I'll let you read that, that she really did gain a lot from it, having never really understood what QI was before, and how maybe that she could utilise it within her own clinical practice. She now is really coming, she's keen and she's really eager to take that forward. And I suppose it's a bit like me going through my second year and third year. Everywhere you go and everyone you talk to and everyone you work with, it suddenly all becomes, that's a QI project. You know, you're becoming one of those really annoying people that goes, that's QI, and trying to encourage them to do it when they're utterly not wanting to at this moment in time, which is really understandable. But I think that's important, again, just because it helps everybody to see the added value that one person can have, and the even greater value that more than one person can have when we start working together. So especially, again, I've learned the long and hard way that you really need a working party, you need a group of people. I'm a great ideas person, but actually I still need the team of people around me to help that come to fruition. It's not possible on your own. And I suppose that really leads me quite nicely onto that learning culture, and why that is so important within our safety culture. Risk is really, unfortunately, completely inherent in what we do in healthcare work, but I think it's important to recognise that safety ultimately is defined as the ability of individuals or organisations to deal with risks and hazards that avoid damage or losses but still achieve their goals. So we're not trying to get rid of risk completely. It is always going to be inherent in what we do. We are people, and so are our service users. So the culture of an organisation, the culture of a profession is really important, and we talk a lot about safety culture, but I think the key here is that learning culture is utterly underpinning all of it. So I now work, as I mentioned earlier, with the Patient Safety Collaborative. So I work with Wessex, PSC, and thankfully for me, I do that within the maternity and neonatal spheres, which is my knowledge base anyway, so that should be helpful. But for those of you who aren't familiar or don't link in specifically with an AHSN at the moment, they work across a number of programs. If you can see from the driver diagram here, a number of programs, 5 different programs. And like I said, mine is the MAP-NEO. So very specifically, we've got smoking and pregnancy, optimization and stabilization of the preterm infant, and managing deterioration. They each have different focuses within them as well. And I think the key thing to say about how I then go about, I suppose, supporting others in doing this work now is that it is all about communication and building relationships, which I think we all agree is essentially key to our role as consultant practitioners or any form of leader that we might go on to be within the NHS or another organisation. And I will leave it there and say thank you very much and hand you over